Well, as people review their business models and establish new strategies or new visions, really, for the way forward before they get into strategy, and really establish what they're going to do and how they're going to focus going forward, it's you can really see now the leadership roles that are heading up groups compared with those that are caretaker type executive managers. The whole world is changing, so there are those leaders who have got the skill to review the situation carefully, look at the opportunities that could be opening up going forward and going for them. And then there are those that can only really think in terms of that's how they used to do it in the past, so that's how they should do it going forward. The good caretaker managers, but are lacking that vision of the route forward in this changing world we're living in. And there's a lot of those, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, there's a lot of there's a lack of leadership out there in this time of trouble and strife. So what's my message? Well, there's only so much wait and see one can do in a process like this, and this is going to be a long haul process, and you can't afford to sit around on the fence for months and years and so on. You've got to identify where the future is for your business going forward, and then you've got to put your plan in place to establish how you're going to go there, what you're going to do, what you're going to offer. It's a tough one. It's a tough one for the hospitality industry. It's a tough one for the retail industry. It's a tough one for the airline industry. It's a tough one for the automotive industry. I can go on, can't I? You know, some have got it harder than others, there's no doubt. But it's clearly not going to be the same as it was. I was talking to a colleague of mine in the Gulf only yesterday. He was talking about the demand for chartered executive aircraft, particularly executive jets, Gulfstream 5s, Gulfstream 4s, that sort of size aircraft that carry around 10-12 passengers and maximum. Suddenly there's a huge demand in that industry for chartering flights, which wasn't there before. Before these companies who run these chartered airlines, executive charters in particular, had to work very hard at getting their aircraft sorted out in the right routes, because the aircraft end up the wrong side of the world, and it costs them more money to get them back to somewhere else to do the next job, as it were. Now, a lot of the Gulf leaders have their own aircraft as well, some of them more than one, and they use those. They put those out when they're not using them themselves. They also go into the charter bank, as it were, to be used for earning their keep. That whole industry is growing rapidly at the moment. There's huge demand for it, for a lot of obvious reasons. Obviously, the safety in smaller numbers going on aircrafts is obviously one reason, I'm sure. But also, what the industry is doing, that particular part of the industry, they're seeing an opportunity and a gap opening up for more viable offers to people that wouldn't normally charter an aircraft or go in partnership with a chartered aircraft to a particular destination. So you can see the potential opportunity that this gives them. People who are making a sort of once-in-a-lifetime trip across the world, for example, to the Philippines to emigrate, or whatever the case may be, they can charter a small aircraft so they can obviously get themselves onto the aircraft, but they can also take a lot of their possessions with them, which they wouldn't normally be able to do very easily with a normal commercial airline. There are quite a few of these type of offers going up that I've been looking at, and it's quite interesting to actually see how this is working. And yeah, although they're not cheap by domestic airline standards, they are certainly not expensive either, as far as when you're making a move of that nature. So you can understand what I'm saying here. There's also lots of parties, groups that go out on these small family group holidays, where there's probably 2 or 3 families involved, where chartering an aircraft that just carries the group, the family, whatever the case is, it becomes a worthwhile exercise. So it is an area which is definitely growing in the airline industry. Not going to make major shifts in the change. There's still going to be major redundancies and a lot of airlines going out of business, because the mass movement is obviously going to be affected the most. But it's an area which is potentially has opportunity to grow within the industry. If one looks at the hospitality industry and restaurants, the same is being applied there. I've seen some restaurants that are really seizing the opportunity of getting the seating in their restaurants down significantly, and also building a restaurant situation where air changes are happening on a more regular basis, and there are creating attractive design barriers that make dining more protected and more intimate at the same time. In the process, they're spending money on it, of course they are, but they see the future, they see it's happening. Whereas others are just sitting like this and waiting to see what's going to happen and if it's going to end, and going about it that way. So leadership is definitely starting to show its true value in this. With the retailers, I haven't seen anything yet. I haven't seen a retailer. I haven't seen Tesco or Sainsbury or Asda or Morrison's, or even M&S come up with any real, what I would call, major changes in how they conduct in their business as far as their retail outlets go. Yes, they're all starting to try and get more effective with online shopping, although slots are still a problem as everyone grapples for that. But that's only one part of the actual offer that one has with retail. Retailers are not looking at their store design at this stage that I can see. Certainly nothing's evident yet when I've asked and spoken to retailers about it. They're just not sure. When it comes to the retail industry as a whole, certainly there is an increase in the health and wellness industry. Health foods, who I talk to on a regular basis, as you know, they tell me that business has been good. Business is booming. Although health stores, everyone in the wholesale side of the business are working from home rather than at the office in Nottingham, their customers, their clients, are all trading and doing very well. So the demand in that area is high. And again, I would expect health and wellness to be growing as a means of people are now focused on wanting to remain healthy. They want to make sure they're putting the right things in their body. They want to make sure they're not letting it slip away. So I think it's something, again, which is going to be on the increase. And health and wellness, before this thing started, I always said is going to be a future. And health and wellness is going to be very much more dominant, even in the regular retail outlets that will find an option, an offer for it. But now with this disease that's hit us, I can see it even being more in demand. So health and wellness will be an area where I would if you're going to invest in the retail industry, that would be an area where you would look at, because it's in everyone's mind, young and old, as far as wanting to be as healthy as possible. Counteract what the bad stuff is I'm putting in my body, I'll counteract it with some good stuff to put in my body. It's that approach, and I think it makes sense. So that I would definitely watch. When it comes to discounting and importing, and I think the days of the cheap importer, I'm talking about the pound stretcher operations, I think they're going to be a thing of the past. Wilkinsons as well. I think they are. They've had their days, and value for money in that area can be picked up by the better qualified retailers who can do a better job, can pick up on those break off options. But I think filling containers from China and wholesalers selling the cheap crud type of product into the market, as I call it, I think that is seen its years now. It's something of the past. We aren't a country anymore which is all about pile it high and sell it cheap. We're about value for money, and value for money can be here at home as much as it can be being put together in China in mass. It can be done here, which brings me back onto the other areas of focus, and that is the areas of manufacturing in the UK, where, you know, why bring products in from the East if you can make them here anyway, and manufacture them and start, apart from supplying the local market, start exporting them to other markets as well. You know, I think that element of development is something that the UK has got to be looking at. I'm talking with a company that's going to bring a bottling plant here to the UK. Okay, something they see as a need from where they're coming in the world. But there are many others who have the ability to manufacture here in the UK and do it well, made in Britain, that they can then export to other parts of the world. I think it's something that's very much in the need. The auto industry was in trouble really before this virus started. Car sales were down. The need for getting into electric vehicles was certainly there and being identified, but electric vehicles were still far too expensive, and obviously the charge facilities around the country are just not there to cope with the electric vehicles. But I think a whole culture on transportation is now changed, because we you know, the government was looking at methods of putting more people on trains and buses and things to get around the country, make it efficient with the new high-speed rail, etc., and everything else going on with network. Now they've got to look at how people move around. So yes, they can build railways and have trains going up and down the country, but they've got to think about, are people going to use them these days? What is the future on how we travel in a closed compartment with other people? How do we make that work safely and effectively? So there's some work to go on in that area, as there is with the buses, as there is with the tubes. You know, cars were something of, do we really need one? You know, they're back on the page again now as, well, we probably can't do without one, at least one per family at the moment. So it's a tough one for the industry as a whole, the transport industry, the auto industry. We know we need transport for moving goods. Products from around, you know, throughout the country have got to be moved around. Yes, that's clear. So the right efficient vehicles in place to do that movement goes without saying, and that's again is something that's been really overlooked over the last decade or couple of decades. It hasn't really been carefully planned with the road structure and systems in place and everything else. So transport needs to be looked at in general, in my view, very carefully again as to what is the right approach going forward for our future. What else have I not covered? Well, as you can see, it's really, we're in this phase of hold, and it's all about leadership. It's all about the brains coming together to see where we're going. There are those that are going to wait, and there are those that are going to make the leap of faith, as it were. So I think it's interesting times we're living in, obviously. One area of the economy I haven't touched, but I think is very important always has been important, but been ignored to a large extent by our governments, not just this one, but all governments that we've had really, and that's our agriculture and fisheries. That's an area where we should be producing enough food for the country as a whole. At the moment we produce about 50% of our food, and the rest we have to import. We should be, at least producing enough food for ourselves, and then looking at other products then that we can export, obviously. But we need to do it properly. We need to be planning it properly. It's no good. When we were part of the EU, we were filling fields full of wildflowers and getting the farmers were getting subsidies for doing it, so that we protect the dairies in Europe, or the butter producers, or the cheese producers, or whatever else. Now it's a little bit different, and we've got to get back to the roots of the earth and how we produce our products. And the same goes with our fisheries. We've got to start using our fisheries properly and effectively, first for our own market, and obviously then for exporting that we don't need. Very important. Gosh, I do talk sense, don't I? Talk to you again soon. Bye bye.